as everyone has kind of seen, I'm a first year, and your first year is often really reflective. And so for me, I've been reflecting on the moments that have kind of brought me to this time now, my first year at Wharton. And one experience that really stands out to me is my summer quarantining in McCall, Idaho. Not only because it was a recent experience, but also because it was so impactful. So let me just give you a little bit of backstory. A summer in Idaho was first introduced to me by my partner, Steven. He's also a business school student and he has a background in real estate private equity. And so, kind of out of the blue, in March of this past year, an alum reaches out to him and asks if he would be interested in a ski resort development opportunity, kind of like Lake Tahoe, but a smaller scale. And so, due to the pandemic and some shifts in his internship plans, he decides to say yes. I had also just finished my internship or my work as a consultant in LA. And so, next thing we know, we find ourselves packing up to go to McCall, Idaho. And as kind of a backstory, I knew literally nothing about Idaho. I'd heard anecdotally that it was a state that was famous for potatoes. I also was a little nervous that this was going to be some kind of a catfish situation because we literally didn't know what was going to await us when we arrived. But in all seriousness, I did a bit of research and found out that the state of Idaho has a population of 1.8 million. And of that population, there's less than 1% of people that are of Black or African American descent. And if you zoom into the town of McCall, about 2 hours north of Boise, where we'd be staying, that amounts to about 2 Black people in the entire town. So just by going, me, Stephen, and another one of the interns were more than doubling the population of Black people in that town, bringing the total number of Black people in McCall to about 5 people. So as you might imagine, the first few days were really jarring for me. I would walk into the store and we would just get tons of stares. People would comment on things like my skin and say, "I love your skin." And I would wonder, is it because I actually have nice skin or is it because it's Black skin? People would talk to me about my braids or my hair. And everywhere we went, people would comment, "So what brings you to McCall?" The undertone of that question being, "We know that you're not from here." And so I can say that there's never really been a time in my life where I felt like such a spectacle. But through a number of kind of happenstance interactions and unexpected relationships, it became a really kind of transformative experience for me. And there are so many stories that I could tell you about McCall, but I'm going to zoom into 2 of them. So first, let me tell you about Jared and Claire, a conservative couple from Montana and South Carolina. Claire was a hairstylist for about a third of the people in McCall. And Jared was kind of a local home builder and also the owner of a small local gun store. It turns out that they had actually built the Airbnb cabin that we were staying in for the summer. And during one of our first nights in town, they kind of peeked their heads over and decided to introduce themselves. It ultimately ended up with them inviting us over to their house for a pizza dinner, and we said yes. During the night, we talked to them about everything from their path to McCall and how they made it to Idaho in the first place. We learned about how they met each other and fell in love in the oil rigs of Antarctica, of all places. And we learned about their views on gun ownership. Jared shared that he thought of a gun as a right that you have, and especially in a small town, to protect yourself and your family. He shared that there was something that he believed in called a culture of respect that you kind of pass along when you pass along a firearm along your lineage. And he felt like that culture of respect had been kind of missing in recent times. And he thought that was the cause of a lot of the mass shootings. He had a hot take that he thought gun kind of training should be taught in schools. And initially, I had a really visceral reaction to all of his kind of thoughts and perspectives. But over the coming weeks, as we realized that we were visitors in a town where almost every one of our neighbors had a gun, it really made his words take on a new meaning. Jared and Claire also shared with us that they'd never really had Black friends. largely due to the fact that there were no Black people in the town for them to befriend. The only Black people that they saw were on the news. So not only did the dinner teach us a little bit more about them and their value systems and perspectives, it allowed them to learn a little bit more about us, to pick our brains on our backgrounds, our perspectives on pivotal issues in this country, and also just give them a chance to get to know us. And so, because of how open and honest the conversation was, despite our very obvious differences, we decided to keep in touch with them and ultimately invited them over to our Juneteenth barbecue a few weeks later. And even till today, we still keep in touch with Jared and Claire. So interaction 2 came in the form of an unassuming workout. One afternoon, as he often does, my partner Stephen decided to go out on a run. This was about 1 week after the George Floyd murder. As he was walking on the walking path or running down the walking path, he notices that there is an older white man, maybe about 85 years old, that's just staring at him. The way the path is kind of organized, he has to ultimately pass this man. And so as he runs, he continues to notice this man looking at him. He runs closer and closer, noticing that the man hasn't taken his eyes off him, and he starts to assume the worst. And ultimately, as he gets close to passing this man, the man kind of stops him and says, "So, how have you been doing with everything going on?" So not only was this a really surprising outcome of that interaction, it also was really interesting because the man had the same name as Stephen's mom, Terry. And that opened up kind of a dialogue between the two that continued on throughout the summer with coffee chats and more walks along that same path. And who would have thought that an 85-year-old white man from middle America and a 28-year-old Black man from New Jersey would have had those kinds of conversations. But however, when I heard the story, I was really triggered. The outcome of that run could have looked really different for Stephen if the story of Ahmaud Arbery is any indication. And I felt that same jolt that mothers, wives, sisters, friends feel as they think about their Black men out in America. And so, despite the outcome, that moment was a reminder, or kind of the constant reminder, of the issues that are still so prominent in our country. And so, as I reflect on takeaways from the summer, I think to myself, what would have happened if we'd said no to the pizza dinner, or if Stephen had gone along a different bike path that afternoon, or if we'd said no to the Idaho experience altogether? And the answer is probably nothing would have happened. We would have maybe just had a different dinner instead of pizza. And maybe Stephen would have had a normal workout. And we could have had a great summer in LA or in Boston or New York, binging on Netflix, which we had become experts in at that point. But I'm actually really grateful for the experience because it provided me with a level of proximity and a newfound kind of humanization of people that are really different from me that I'd never experienced before. And despite the fact that I was born in Nigeria, raised across Atlanta, have lived in New York and LA, and also studied abroad in Italy, I've never really felt like I've interacted across that kind of level of difference before. Because I didn't grow up in a rural area. I'm not a gun owner. I'm not Republican, and I'm not white. But in Idaho, I was surrounded by so many people that embodied those descriptors. And so now when I see someone like them, whether it's on the news or even in my classrooms, I can understand a little bit more about where they're coming from, even if I don't, align fully to all of those same value systems. And part of me feels like if more people had experiences like this, where you truly have to interact across difference, our country might look really different. And so as many people are now grappling with this question of whether to continue with the kind of business as usual and what they're used to and what's comfortable, or whether they should lean into the uncomfortable and different, I enter this new chapter knowing exactly how I'll answer the question. I will lean into the uncomfortable. Thank you.